This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And we are down to like the final week and a half, 2 weeks before we say bye-bye to the NBA regular season. Hello to the play-ins. But there's still a little bit of time left for us to make sure that we're properly utilizing teams that clearly have no shot whatsoever to be a part of this year's 2023-24 NBA season. But with that being said, it doesn't mean that these teams don't give you a little something to look forward to, right? And so, again, our coveted autopsy report, we're covering those teams. You know, as always, man, it's great because there's so many cross-sectioning things happening when it comes to the game and the game of basketball. NCAA Final Four, championship game, you know, NBA basketball. It's just all good in the wood, my man. And as always, let me roll out the red carpet to my brother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? And as much as basketball is moving and shaking, you, my friend, are also doing a little bit of moving and shaking as we are recording this podcast, too.
Well, you know what it is, family. You know, representing the 19 Media Group, always got a little something going on, stirring in that capacity. So, yeah, we'll be covering the Mime Film Festival here for 19 Media Group / Dope Interviews. But, you know, we're here to talk about hoops. And these final two teams, really, before we get to the play-in situation, and we'll see how next weekend goes when we're recording and who actually is in and who is out. But I think we have a pretty good indication of the top 10 right now in both conferences. So I think this is actually our final autopsy report of the non-play-in worthy teams, I think, at this, if my count is correct. So exciting times here ahead, man. And the NBA basketball is getting its most exciting part of the season with the playoffs right on the horizon.
Yeah, and to your point, you know, the last few games are going to be the most important. I mean, typically we already will know, you know, which teams have pretty much positioned themselves to be participating in the play-in, and the teams that have already locked in their seedings for the playoffs. But this has been a year where it's really going to come down, you know, to the final stretch of games, and more importantly, may determine which team has home field advantage, so to speak, when it comes to the play-in situation, which may be crucial, you know, for the participants. So it's good to see that. But I think also as well, too, these regular season games are being impacted by the teams that we're going to be discussing in regards to their autopsying, like, you know, what you're seeing from, you know, the two teams that we'll be discussing this week, which will be the Brooklyn Nets and the Portland Trailblazers. You know, what they have going on, I think, still will impact and still, you know, have meaning in some regards to what we're talking about and what the future may look like. And I think that's why it's so important to take some of that opportunity and time. I know the focus and attention is going to be about the play-in and the playoffs, but we also want our listeners who are Portland Trailblazer fans and Brooklyn Nets fans, do they want to feel encouraged about what they're seeing from their team in their final stretch of home games? Because it's going to be a long off season. These teams may not look like, you know, what they represent themselves as by the end of this season, come the start of next season. And I think you just want to start focusing, you know, towards draft, towards summer league, like what steps and strides are going to be made for these teams respectively.
Yeah, and that's what we're here to discuss. So I think Brooklyn and, you know, the Portland Trailblazers, very, very different seasons, but I don't know if they're going to have different in terms of what they expected coming in. You know, I think maybe Portland expected to be this bad. Brooklyn did not. But now how they both move forward, I think that's the similar trajectory that they're both on, and they have some real decisions to make, as all teams do when they head to the offseason.
Absolutely. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lee, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. Be sure to check us out. Go to the home website in order to check out not only this show, but our other shows as well, too. As my man Shaw alluded to, we also rock with the 19 Media Family Group. Be sure to check us on YouTube. And if you see the blue and white logo, that's 19 Media Group. So go to www.19mediagroup.com to not only check out our show, but the family of great shows and content creators that we have rolling with 19 Media, covering everything from music, sports, entertainment, culture, you name it. 19 Media Group has got it. So without any further ado, Shaw, let's get right into it, man. Let's talk about, you know, on our coveted autopsy report, we're going to discuss the Brooklyn Nets, and then later on we'll discuss the Portland Trailblazers. So starting with the Brooklyn Nets, I think, one of the things, and we've had this conversation before, about Brooklyn. It sucks in some regards because now you're seeing the New York Knicks once again stake their claim as, again, being the king of kings in New York as far as, the basketball vibe, the basketball culture goes. And one of the things that has really troubled me when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets, and I've expressed this in previous shows, is if you don't get this right, if you don't do this correctly, if there's not sustainability in how the organization and the franchise operates and the way that it tries to, become a successful group, which is, reflective on the way that the team operates, how the team continues to conduct business, how the players respond and react, you basically become a marginalized organization. And in many respects to the outside community, it makes it look like a fluke organization, a fluke team, right? Where guys can just go there and get paid, but not necessarily do anything productive. And so this is the thing that I fear. You have some nice pieces. You have some nice players, obviously led by Mikal Bridges. Are we saying that Mikal Bridges, Shaw, is a frontline guy, a guy who is what your starting block should be in order to start building a successful franchise? And I'm not saying rebuild. I'm saying building, because this is what it always feels like with the Brooklyn Nets. It's never a true build. It's never a rebuild. It's always kind of like a stopgap placement because no one truly understands the dynamic and the direction and where the team is moving forward. And I just wonder, how does that start and begin with Mikal Bridges and the rest of the roster in kind?
Well, I think with Bridges, they were hoping and banking on the late season success from last year was going to really roll over into him proving to be a 1A-ish type player. I think we have enough evidence here now that that's probably not his role. And that's not to knock this individual. He's a very good basketball player, and it's kind of a plug and play guy in a lot of systems. But if he's your lead dude, like the lead horse, there's going to be a cap on how far you can go. And granted, this team has struggled with a lot of injuries, the coaching situation, the front office situation. So there hasn't been a rock of stability here throughout the course of this. But I think everybody in the league can say is like, all right, I wouldn't feel comfortable with Mikal Bridges as my number one guy. And now the issue is with Brooklyn, they have a lot of guys who are good basketball players, solid basketball players, rotation basketball players, but all probably a little bit more miscast because it's starting at the top where with Bridges is. So everybody's basically a slot out more from where they probably should be. And that's an intriguing place to be from a franchise, because you can't say you're devoid of talent, because I think those are players that other teams may want and would potentially build around. Or do you have enough juice here to bring in somebody else now to take some of those lead responsibilities away from Bridges? That's a very, very dynamic space to be in, I think, right now for Brooklyn, given everything that they have gone through in the last years. I don't know that they're going to be a free agent destination for anybody. And as we've said through the Autopsy Report, not a great free agent class. So when do you make that potential move? And that's probably still a year out. The reason I say that here too, and I definitely want to tag you back in, next year, Ben Simmons' deal comes off your books. That's $40 million extra in cap space that you'll have. You'll be so well below the cap threshold, presumably so, that it would make sense to make play for that 25 NBA free agent draft class and kind of seeing what you can do there. They missed a boat, at least in the previous year, to trade Bridges. Again, a lot of us bantered about that Houston deal potentially, where they could have got Jalen Green and most of the draft capital back from the James Harden deal, which probably would have been a better move for the long-term stake of this franchise, but can't cry to spilled milk. And I don't know if that deal is still there for them now, especially with the way Jalen Green has ascended in Houston. So for me right now, the Brooklyn Nets are very much in a state of transition, but I think they know that Bridges can't be the lead guy. And I think they'll hold on to him and see what 25 brings for them in free agency.
So you bring up some interesting points about Mikal Bridges, and I think we obviously acknowledge the fact that he's not a number one. The one thing that I had always leaned on, Shaw, is, again, it's not that I would never see Mikal Bridges being a number one. It's what it takes for him to get to that point. It's not about a mentality. It's about a style of play. It's about a style that obviously has been marginalized because of the fluctuation happening in the coaching space. So it isn't as if Mikal Bridges came in and his style augments what Sean Marks needs to do in order to build around it. It's kind of like they're just, placing pieces to kind of see what may fit Jigger. And now they're beginning to realize that nothing that they're going to do is going to really shake or transform this. This is going to come down to, there has to be a style, a system that they can build off of and build from. That to me is what I get the sense of. Kevin Ollie has been an admirable coach. I can't see whether or not, he's transformative and is going to be able to develop some of these guys. You got some really good players like in Claxton. I think just recently, I was watching the other night, Clowney, I believe, Noah Clowney. Upside, athleticism there, right? But where does all that come to play? Not just with Mikal Bridges, but just with the way that the Brooklyn Nets want to play basketball, with the way that they want to execute, especially in a very loaded Atlantic division. So all of that being said, Shaw, you brought up the one person who I wanted to be on board with him so much, because I felt like some of the deals that he did were by, hostage situation, right? With Sean Marks. He did it because he was at the behest of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, right? And the desperation was there, right? Coming from the top down with Joe Tsai as the owner. Now I'm beginning to see, even at the top of his powers, he is not the greatest evaluator of talent. And I think this now is going to come full circle with whether or not you continue to ride or die with Marks and the roster, or you continue to ride with Marks to clean up this roster. Either way, what you're beginning to see is, if you are leaning into what your point is, Shaw, once they get under the cap, am I going to be confident that Marks is going to pick out quality talent that collectively together can come out and look like what the Oklahoma City Thunder look like? I don't think so. And if it's based on him making moves as far as moving Mikal Bridges and getting something back, okay, maybe. But again, it puts us right back in the piece of when he rolled that dice and got back Bridges, and he relied on Bridges and Johnson. Are we now collectively saying this is what we want the future to look like with the Brooklyn Nets? And because Marks is making that call, are we now feeling confident he can come around and do something like that again, but with the slate wiped clean and not still kind of, still playing from behind because of what didn't work with the Simmons move and everything like that?
I mean, and it's unfortunate that so much salary is tied to somebody who is just not able to stay healthy, and we're not quite sure, quite frankly, likes basketball. I just, I get a list of this.
Where I am with that, Shaw. You know where I've been at.
Yeah, and it's not to relitigate any of that, but the salary hold is what the interesting part of this is too, because like you can't extrapolate any value from that any way, shape, or form right now, and that's really unfortunate. It's interesting because you mentioned Clowney, he's getting some minutes here toward the tail end of the season.
Wait, Shaw, there's one thing I want to. I'm not saying maybe I misinterpreted what you were saying, and it's not about relitigating, but I want to throw this caveat in and then get back to Clowney. I feel like this is part and parcel of the problem too with Marks in his selection of coaches. I think that he has not been the best quote unquote evaluator of head coaches that should hold accountability to the players and to the system and the style. Because if you think about it, he's responsible for Jacques Vaughn. And while Jacques Vaughn was okay, the rumors about him catering to Ben Simmons, which I thought was an absolute miss. I don't know why he even thought that made any sense, regardless of whether or not Ben Simmons was healthy or not healthy. I'm just saying that, like, not since Atkinson have we seen a legitimate head coach who can come in and it's about, hey, my coaching acumen outranks any of what you guys think that you know or can or will ever know about the game of basketball until you get to that level. Until I see Marks execute like that, which I don't. I have no confidence that he's going to do that. This will always plague a lot of the decision making that he makes even moving forward.
I mean, and again, I think he's been okay in middle to late round evaluation in terms of talent. coaching, I think being bullied to some degree, and too strong of a term, I think, for today's culture. But if you twisted his arm because of the high level coaching that was there, high level players that were brought in, and then you got rid of Atkinson to bring in Nash, and then that didn't work out. And then Devon, like I said, again, the coaching side, a lot to be desired. The talent evaluation side, not as bad, especially when it comes to middle and late round draft picks, but they need to be in a situation where they can try to get into the top 5 or top 10 at least, and see what they do there. And even with Clowney, who's playing some minutes here now, well, what is the future of his role on this team? Because you also have to pay Nick Claxton. What do you pay Nick Claxton with this team? And I think we talk about it all the time when it comes to players and their salaries and when they need to be evaluated. A lot of it is based on where is a team at that given moment. And it's like, hey, your services complement us in this way, so we're willing to pay maybe a couple dollars extra because of that. Are you just paying Claxton to keep him around? Do you want to feature him? Because he's, I think, again, solid basketball player, but he's not a building block. And that puts you in a very precarious situation when you're trying to create a financial structure that can be somewhat withstanding. Is Claxton a guy, is not to pick on him here too, but is he somebody else? Well, hey, when 25 comes and free agents are available, hey, I want to go to Brooklyn and play with Nick Claxton and Mikal Bridges. I don't know that that's overly enticing.
But remember, the New York Knicks had faced a very similar situation with Mitchell Robinson. And you can see, give credit to the New York Knicks. They recognized very quickly what needed to be addressed, right? Even if at the expense that they wind up saying, we may not be able to keep Mitchell Robinson, pay Mitchell Robinson, whatever the case may be, the focus of this team, the strength of this team lie in the compatibility of the players that they see are versatile and can execute based on what, in other words, you had to lean more into Tom Tibbs and what Tom Tibbs needs, or you had to lean more into what you're seeing your personnel and your players give you. And until guys like Nick Claxton are on the floor, for several games at a time, for several minutes, and you see how he interacts with Bridges, you see how their two-man game can operate, you see what Claxton, is he really a difference maker defensively, all that kind of stuff. You're not seeing any of that stuff materialize. You have to pivot. Like, the pivoting game in the NBA is even quicker than it has been in previous years. There was always that lag time where you can still give time and evaluation. We would have already told you the moment that Ben Simmons started, having these injuries and all of this other stuff going on, that you had to quickly say, we need to have a backup plan. We need to pivot, because how confident can you possibly be with some of the players and the way that the roster is constructed that you're going to be able to clearly make an evaluation about what steps you're going to do 1 year, 2 year, 3 years down the line, if you're solely depending on people coming back or solely depending on people saying they're going to be a better version of themselves, but they never show up or it never comes to fruition.
Well, and Claxton, Mitchell Robinson is a suitable, I think, comparison, at least in terms of the salary exercise. Maybe not light for like in terms of their overall skill set, but Robinson is in the $15 to $16 million range. I'd be fine if you need to play Claxton that. But if I'm Claxton, I'm looking at Cam Johnson, who was obviously hurt a good part of this year, and he's in the 25 to $24 million range. I'll be like, listen, I'm doing a lot more than this guy. And his agent is probably saying the same thing. So then that puts, Marks in a precarious situation. It's like, all right, well, and some people may still say that Cameron Johnson has a better trajectory and overall talent and skill set than Nick Claxton. Maybe you would make that argument, but I don't think Nick Claxton would make that argument, especially because he's been available for the majority part of the year. So now, is he worth $25 million over the next 3 years to your franchise and organization to kind of keep their locker room happy? That's where I say Marks it's tough. It's tough. And I wouldn't want to be him from this side. I think that they have a team option on Cam Thomas, who's another guy who's polarizing. Let's just kind of put it, let's put it mildly there. I think they pick up the team option and then give themselves at least another year to evaluate what he is and, what he means even to this team and its future. Otherwise, do you not take the team option there, free up more salary, and continue to try to develop younger guys? Brooklyn, to me, especially with the coaching situation, if Ollie's going to stay, if Marks is even going to stay, this is more of the same. I think next year, kind of this 25 to 30 win team at best. Can do a little something here and there, if they try defensively. But it's not, there's not a lot here of meat on the bone here for this Brooklyn Nets team that I'm excited about, at least going into next year.
How confident you are, Shaw, with the backcourt situation for the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah. So what is it?
I believe
So that's the question. What is the backcourt situation
right,
for
exactly.
Brooklyn?
Because as far as from what I've seen and the way that Cam Thomas plays, there's no way that you can ask of him to transition. He is a scorer. That's what he is. That's what I'm not saying that he cannot evolve, but he is not going to evolve well enough with, I think, even the field of possibilities that are going to be out there in this upcoming draft, what may be available to you as far as free agency goes. It's interesting to me that we're still kind of at that point where maybe you were hoping for that from Ben Simmons. That should not even be the case. I believe that if you are the Brooklyn Nets, you need a true point guard. I think Schroeder is a serviceable guard, but he is not a starting point guard. He's not absolutely a floor general. I think he's a plug and play kind of player and a guy who I think can help a guy like Cam Thomas from a second unit perspective. But you have to be thinking draft wise. You need to be thinking we need a floor general. We need somebody that is going to elevate Mikal Bridges, elevate Cam Johnson, elevate Nick Claxton, elevate some of these other secondary guys. Like, and I don't know whether or not you're going to be able to find that. I mean, we're not trying to, talk predictions about this upcoming draft class yet or anything like that. What I'm saying is that, to your point, it makes it a tougher find because either you're going to have to find it from the free agency aspect of things, or you're really hoping that there's a deep enough class of players from the backcourt position that can help immediately to address that for Kevin Ollie.
Yeah, I don't know that there is. So I think it's another year of Dennis Schroeder. He has another year left on the contract. Maybe you bring back Dennis Smith Jr. To be the serviceable quote unquote backup. But then, like you said, Cam Thomas playing that 2 or just that kind of that wing position, wherever you want to slot him in the backcourt. It's not, there's not a lot of path here. And that's the other point I was making.
It's amazing that 30 wins, Shaw. It's amazing that they've eclipsed 30 wins. It's not that they're a bad basketball team.
Yeah.
But I'm a little surprised by it because you look at a lot of the way that they play, and it almost feels like the Brooklyn Nets have guys just out of position, right? Like they've all had to play dual, roles, so to speak, to compensate for what they don't really do great and they don't necessarily do poorly. They just sit in the middle.
But that's what I'm saying. Like you don't. This is the worst place to be in the NBA in a lot of ways. Well, second worst because I think it's like when you're the proverbial 8 seed all the time, and so then you're out of the lottery and everything like that too. Like this is now, but this is a different type of purgatory because even in terms of the roster construction, good but not great players. So now it gets you into the middle to late part of the lottery. And, you really kind of have to try to figure out, can you hit home runs from there? Or are you going to start to diversify some of these nice role players? I mean, in Dorian Finney-Smith, maybe somebody would have some interest there if you try to move him. But you're not going to get a lot of draft capital back from him. So maybe hold on to him to, until next season, trade deadline, where maybe people be like, hey, he might be the missing piece type of situation. But people aren't going to jump at that right now as you're going into the summer, especially with free agency on the horizon and other trades that might be available. So to me, Brooklyn, despite us talking negatively about them, yeah, they're probably on pace for another 28 to 32 win season next year with solid, if you will, talent, but nothing that's going to overwhelm anybody. Yeah, and they'll sneak up and beat you on some nights because maybe they'll just outscore you, especially if Cam Thomas is hot. But going back to your earlier point, the backcourt situation is one that they're going to have to address in some semblance of getting even just more talent up there. And that might come through, again, the draft. It might come through minimum free agents, so to speak, or maybe even the G League. But this is a situation that is not truly tenable when it comes to the talent evaluation for the Brooklyn Nets. They've got to figure out a way to get more on this roster.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we will focus our attention on the Portland Trailblazers. I know it's a rough season for the Blazers, but can Billups and company help this team take a step forward? Is there a path to some possible success? Everything that's been going on out there in Portland, you don't want to miss out on that. But first, did you know that there's a whole collection of Black-led products that fit into your daily routine and lifestyle that you can get at Walmart? And it's so important that we show Black founders some love, not just during Black History Month, but all year long. Because every time we buy a Black-led brand, we're making room or creating demand for another Black-led brand. Black founders and the products they bring to the table are creating a whole new world of choices at Walmart. Some of the products I want to check out are Natural Vert Granola, Zach and Zoe Honey, Scotch Porter Beard Balm, and Partake Cookies. Go to walmart.com/black and unlimited to discover all the amazing Black-owned products that you can add to your daily routine. More Baseline, Callie Warren Shaw. Don't go away. We're back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, our coveted Autopsy Report. Just finished discussing the Brooklyn Nets, and so now we're going to focus our attention to the Portland Trailblazers. Shaw, when we talk about the Portland Trailblazers, it's kind of weird. Like, I know everyone expected the Blazers to be a struggling basketball team. I got to tell you, though, given the way that this team is structured and given the way things could have really kind of fallen apart or gone sideways very, very bad. And while this team is essentially the fifth or maybe about the fifth worst team in the NBA, I think a lot of people probably predicted it would have been far worse. It probably would have been one of the worst teams in the NBA, right? Given you look at the comparative rosters. But the Portland Trailblazers have over 20 wins, which I was surprised at. And I think, given the situation, Chauncey Billups has done an admirable job. You know, you don't have your star guard, the person who you essentially gave up, gave Damian Lillard for, essentially. You moved from Damian Lillard with. Given he's been gone for a good portion of the year, and while he has not had a successful season, a successful rookie campaign, I think all things considered, the Portland Trailblazers have escaped basketball purgatory in some ways of being ostracized immensely, given what we knew was going to happen to this team coming into the regular season.
Well, I mean, that's ironically, don't they play in the Rose Garden or something like that, or used to? So I think that's a rosy outlook on this. And what I'm concerned about for Portland is, this is one of those situations, bottom third and pretty much everything, 29th, 22nd, 27th, in a lot of things. Like it's pretty dire. But what I think I'm perplexed even by some of your own assessment is like, well, I think we came into the season feeling like, hey, they have some solid NBA guys and some guys who we think might have some pride. And would this be a little bit of like the Utah Jazz situation from a year ago, like to begin the year? Yeah. Would they just kind of overplay their expectations? What has happened though, and I want to be careful how I say this, is that I think they are probably going to be able to trick themselves into saying it's like, well, we were vastly injured. We didn't have a lot of our guys for a good part of the season. And had these guys been here, we would have had a better record. Maybe we would have been a 34 or a 35 win team. Still not great enough to make the playoffs in the West, but you feel like you're in a better spot. I don't know if that's the accurate approach to this, though, because I think the roster duplicity in some ways is I don't know that everybody complements each other in the way that they would hope to. Scoot came into the year probably, hands-on favorite to at least finish third in the Rookie of the Year voting. And I don't even know if he's played enough games in essence to get there, right? He's just missed so much time. I think it'll be very close for him. I think he's at 58 games or 57 games played right now. But the rest of this roster, how does it work? Like, truly, how does it work? Is Shadeon Sharpe, more Cam Thomas, as we were talking about, with the Brooklyn Nets in the segment previously, or is he more versatile than that? Obviously more athletic than Thomas is, and a much better leaper. But again, is he just a high level scorer? And can he do other things that help your roster? DeAndre Ayton, I've had poked some fun at his nicknames and all the things he's trying to do. Sure, he's playing better here now to close the season, but nobody's really playing hard. So yeah, he's getting his doubles and looking, dominating, if you will. But I think it's a little bit empty calories. And then the salary of Jerami Grant. So to me, the roster is just kind of like missing each other. Kind of like passing ships. And Billups has a a really difficult job to kind of reconcile what this roster needs to be, because what is going to be the minutes diet from everybody if and assuming everybody is healthy. Remember, Robert Williams missed most of the year. Brogdon has missed most of the year as well too. So those are all two key veteran pieces that they thought were going to be there and be helpful for them. And I just don't know that you can count on one, the health, or the continuity of this roster to be a much better team than we've seen this year itself.
Yeah, so a lot of great points that you're making, Shaw. I'm going to sum it up this way. And I think we said this as well too. What were they doing putting this roster together? Right? I thought that there probably still would have been moves made. And I think it's interesting that this team, in a way, I don't think that they overachieve, so to speak, as much as it is like this is what you can have, when you do have some talented guys, but this is also what it's a reflection of when these talented guys just don't mesh. Okay. I'm wondering whether or not people are going to ask the question about this team, Shaw. Does the combination of Simons and Henderson work? I don't think it does. I think you have to make a hard decision. Simons is 24. Henderson is 19. Obviously, you're looking at the upside of what Henderson can give you. And we've been talking about how, Anfernee Simons can be perennially that guy, that he could have been the one that would have made that decision for Portland's management to decide on what to do with Damian Lillard. But in essence, it made them decide more about CJ McCollum than it made them to decide about Damian Lillard. And now by keeping Simons, and you see what this looks like with him and Henderson, I don't see where this works. And it doesn't, you can have whatever coach you want on there. I just don't see where Simons and Henderson work as a backcourt combination, as any kind of combination for the Portland Trailblazers. And with that being said, now we shift our focus. Jerami Grant. We're saying the moment that you move Lillard should have been you already are fielding calls about what you can do to move Jerami Grant. Because again, his skill set and the way that he plays kind of reminds me a lot like Mikal Bridges, but his skill set and the way that he plays, tell me how that's going to fit in the grand schemes of what Billups is trying to implement or work or do. So again, like some, talent wise, you could look at some of these guys and say, oh, well, these guys will get you some games. But as far as what the future can look like, is it really showing you whether or not the Portland Trailblazers have an opening where there's some upside, potential in play? And I say this because you've got Simons 24, Ayton 25, Henderson at 19. And I guarantee you, before we get to the third year of this conversation, Shaw, two of these guys are probably not or should not be on this roster, because I don't see where they're going to be competitive and they're going to mesh clearly unless something miraculously happens in the off season. This is, to me, is untenable, and then you add on top of Brogdon and Grant and other, veteran guys that I just think are out of sync with whatever the Portland Trailblazers are doing. This could go sideways even worse, even given what they were able to overcome for this past season.
Yeah, they played guys here. I think a lot of the casual fans, and even myself, and I consider myself casual. I'm like, well, who's that guy? And they've that a lot is just
so like, well, why is he here now? Like, why are you in the game now? Like, what are you doing here?
yeah, man. And where did you come from? Just quite frankly, but they've had to patchwork it, and I get that. Even Banton, who they've gotten, I guess, from Boston. Sure, you took a flyer and you try to figure out, all right, well, what is he? He's still not sure in terms of his roster. Like, I think they slot him as a point guard, but he's more of just a wing, but not a great shooter, but somebody who can slash a little bit and can hit at least the corner threes from time to time. But is he going to really be a big part of what you do here, even next year, assuming Shadeon Sharpe is back and Chris Murray, who they drafted, and all those things? Like you said, it's just a lot of pieces that don't make a whole lot of sense. Grant, they couldn't move until January. But I think the salary is going to scare a lot of people off, especially with all of his money being guaranteed, including the last year being a player option at $36 million, which he'll be opting into. So now he's like, all right, well, do I want to be on the hook for that? Grant at 35 years old, paying $36 million. I don't know if I know a lot of teams that are signing up for that long-term future, anywhere soon. So to me, even the Robert Williams, the Matisse Thybulles,
but to your point though, Shaw, this is where if you're Cronin, you need to own this and eat it. Okay, eat it, because to your point, Chris Murray is coming back. Where are you putting him? How are you going to evaluate Sharpe, Murray, when the ball is going to be in Grant's hands? Grant is going to want to take his shots. You can no longer justify paying this guy that much money and still assume that you're going to figure out a way, or Billups is going to figure out a way to make the ball work for everyone, when the whole idea is, even if you're trying to go young, right? You're trying to, get younger. Getting younger doesn't mean age. Getting younger also means looking at the talent of what the age reflects. And so you got guys that are on the roster that are going to have to take shots, right? That are eating minutes and eating opportunity for the guys you really should be evaluating at this point.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting because the book on Simons is a little different for depending on who you ask. And some people are like, yeah, they should have moved him potentially to a team like Orlando, who is desperate for offense, because that seems to be what he does pretty well and is a capable and sometimes even very efficient scorer. But then if you move him off this roster, then do you want Jerami Grant taking the lion's share of those shots? And the answer to that is no. No, that can't be your existence. Even if DeAndre Ayton is in the space where he's going to be consistent and giving you 20 plus a night. Even if that's the case, you still need some semblance of somebody on the perimeter doing something. And that's where Scoot is supposed to come in. But he's still a slasher at this stage, and he's going to grow and get better, presumably so, and find a way to hit the mid-range consistently, then the three, etc. All of that you expect to happen. But I don't know that they're ready to give up the ghost on Simons, because he's the lone chip that they have that has, I think, value to them personally, and then around the league if they were trying to move him and decided that they were to go another direction. So with the way this season went, I don't think they felt comfortable in moving off of him just yet. And that remains to be seen what they'll do when it comes to the summer when their evaluation hits and Shadeon Sharpe comes back and all these other guys. And to me, one of the big keys here too is Brogdon, and not from the locker room presence, and he's a veteran guy, all those, keywords that we like to utilize. But when he played this year, he played well, but is he a part of what you need in the future? And can you send him off now in the final year of his deal for a 1-year rental to somebody else? And I know he's looking for stability. So even if you're trying to trade him, he'd probably want to resign with whatever that next destination ultimately is, so that he can stop moving around. So they have a couple of moves that they can make that can kind of define and put them on the right path. I can't say it's going to get them right there immediately, but it can start to lay the groundwork for where they want to go.
But, to your point, though, playing well is good. Playing well as far as all eyes on me, the reflection of how my game can translate and be productive for any team I play for, but play well with the team that is in flux or transition, like the Portland Trailblazers, makes you say to yourself, well, having him on the roster does what for Scoot Henderson? Having him on the roster does what for Shadeon Sharpe? You know what I'm saying? It's not to say that he's not a good player, but if I'm, Malcolm Brogdon, given my success when I played with the Boston Celtics, remember, he should have probably been a starter, but he proved that he can play as a 6, right? To me, it doesn't mean that it can't equal and equate to something successful for other teams. I'm hoping that Malcolm recognizes that he's a plug and play and he can give you exactly whatever it is that you need, but let it be meaningful for that next team and not compromise yourself in saying, I got to still play for the Portland Trailblazers. Because the thing I fear more than anything is he may believe that he can be an asset to the Portland Trailblazers. But I think if you're the Portland Trailblazers, you really have to look at this and say, do we want to hang on this perception of we need veteran guys in the locker room? We need, you know what? You've got Chauncey Billups. If I'm Chauncey Billups, I want it all young because I know that I can teach these guys. I can coach them up rather than kind of, putting that on having a veteran presence in there. No. The way that your youth movement is a reflection of, Shaw, to me, go all in with it. Just get the right coaches around to coach up these guys to the type of system that you want. And then you'll begin to see, the results bear fruit rather than allowing the veteran guys to continue to hold up this facade that the team is going to be successful. Even these guys stay or don't stay. If they move on, well, now we see that these guys are going to flourish on their own. You will see what we've seen with the Detroit Pistons. You will see what we've seen with the Houston Rockets. You will see what we've seen with the Orlando Magic. You don't want to be in that space because you have this perception of holding on to veteran guys that you may think are good, but not good for what you need your young players to be at a specific point too.
Yeah, and just for shits and giggles here, if I'm Brogdon, I'm not going to cause a stink, right? But I don't want to be tied to whatever the Portland future is. I just wouldn't want to be. And I think again, it's a matter of how you see yourself. But Brogdon could foreseeably go to a team like maybe like San Antonio. While San Antonio is obviously, we've already autopsied them as well too. Future's brighter there simply because Wemby's there, and they could utilize a point guard, right? So if I'm Brogdon, I'm like, hey, if I'm going to be on a bad team,
right? If you
I want to go where there's promise.
Exactly. If you believe Wemby's already there, this isn't even a question of, oh, we need to give him another year, or you're trying to pair him with no. Whoever Wemby is getting paired with, Wemby is on a trajectory that clearly is a reflection of we need to get some success. To your point, let's go ahead and accelerate that timeline a little bit. And so you need somebody that is going to get that ball to him in his spots, give him that rhythm that he needs. And we've seen Malcolm Brogdon become that kind of player. We've seen him become that kind of guy.
Yeah. So there's a couple of teams I think can utilize him potentially. If Portland were to move off of that, but that's where I said it puts Portland in a position where at least they can explore those things and try to create a better pathway for the talent that they truly need to evaluate, and see them make sure that those players get those reps so that they can also get better. So that everybody knows where they stand in the short term. Brogdon doesn't necessarily fit that. And I'd be curious to think if they feel like Robert Williams does, if he can ever stay healthy and be on the floor as well too. I think he seems to be kind of another plug and play center, but just has a problem staying healthy. So can he be the requisite backup behind DeAndre Ayton moving forward? But Portland, it's been a rough year, rougher than they would have even expected. I'm sure they wanted to see more out of Scoot Henderson more specifically, and the injuries just robbed them, I think, of that. And that's why I think, hey, they can trick themselves into saying, oh, well, we just need to get healthy and we'll be better. And like I said, it's in the beginning. I don't think it's quite that simple, but we'll see what path they ultimately decide here to go down during the offseason in the summer.
Sounds like you were like, you're saying they were giving him a morphine drip. Trying to numb the pain.
Oh, it's like this. It can be very intoxicating though, right? It can really be when you feel like, oh, well, we were just hurt. And it's a very, very easy excuse. So I just, I'm taking a more, I guess, pessimistic approach to that and not saying that wouldn't have been the only issue that they had, because had everybody been healthy, then there could have been the aspect of, well, I'm not getting enough shots for the role because I'm looking over this guy and he's not efficient and so forth and so forth. It just became one of those things. Well, everybody was out at various times and then a lot of overlap. So now you have your Reiths and Bantons coming in here kind of closing out your season when they weren't even sniffing the light of day, on their perceived rosters or the respective rosters going into the year.
Absolutely. This has been a great show, Shaw. Really good stuff. What I like most about when we do our autopsy reports, I know a lot of people are like, well, why would we want to be like, what is there to discuss? The team is a reflection of, what they do offensively, defensively, and we can get into the numbers and things. But what this really becomes down to, Shaw, is like we get into like, what is it that you're taking from this? Like if you had an exit interview session, like, what is it that we're looking at from this team that's making us feel good about what they have leading into the offseason? What good do they have, by the time that we get to all of what they call Christmas time in the NBA, free agency, draft, summer league, it's a whole, even that little 4-month window before you even get to training camp, you ought to be talking glowingly and optimistically about what you want to see for your teams moving forward. And it just feels like that time blows by so quickly, which is why it's so important to figure out what has this team done the last handful of games going into the end of the regular season to make you feel like, hey, we're just 1 or 2 moves away from taking another step forward, or we're 1 or 2 moves away from blowing this thing up, or we're 1 or 2 moves away from basically holding on for dear life. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really phenomenal when we start looking at some of these teams, because we want so much for them to be a part of the conversation come next year. And depending on how they looked at how they ended the season this year, it plays such a critical role in that belief system, and that, in that optimism that you want to buy into with these teams.
Well, I'll close it by saying this, right? in an NBA where there are literally 20 playoff spots up for grabs, if you include, the play-in situations, to be out already, mathematically eliminated, and we've been doing this now with the last 4 weeks. Some teams have been eliminated a whole month ago. That says a lot about the state of their proverbial franchises. So you have to be pretty bad to not be able to be in the top 10, of your respective conferences, a month out from the season even being finished. So that should provide, I think, some direction. I think for some of these organizations is like, all right, you may not be able to jump 3 steps, but at least take a step forward so you can at least be in the conversation for the playing within the final 2 weeks of the season. Right. You know what I mean? Like to be out a month, have nothing to play for, that just sets a bad culture. And some people are like, oh yeah, we can just continue to tally and evaluate, but what are you evaluating, especially if nobody else is playing for anything? So I think that's where, these teams need to take a more stern approach to what they're doing in the short term and long term. And hopefully we won't be able to autopsy people, 4 weeks before the season concludes next year.
Yeah, it does get a little tiring killing, doing these things in bunches.
Bleak for real.
Good stuff all around. And we just want to get, hear from you guys as well too. Be sure to get at us at NBA Baseline. Let us know, what you think. If you're a Nets fan, if you're a Blazers fan, how are you feeling? Is your appetite there? Are you feeling, pretty warm and fuzzy about these teams' futures? We definitely want you to let us know what's going down. For the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys for hopping on board with us this week. Thank you so much, man. Enjoy the basketball that is left to play. Catch up with you next time.